Well, good morning. The election of 2016 is now in the books. It's time to reflect on what happened in Michigan and what it's going to mean in the future. We'll talk about that with someone who is part of that story. It starts right now.
From TV6, this is The Ryan Report. Now, here's your host, Don Ryan.
On November 8th, voters in the 109th State House District, which includes Alger, Luce, Schoolcraft, and most of Marquette County, voted to return John Keevala to his seat in the Michigan House of Representatives. As a representative, Representative Keevala prepares to start his third and final term. He becomes one of the veteran House members under Michigan's term-limited system. Representative Keevala is our guest this morning. Welcome.
Well, thanks for having me again, Don.
First of all, congratulations.
Well, thank you. It feels good.
It was a victory for you, and you know, it's hard for me to believe you're already starting your third term.
You know, we were in a caucus meeting the other day, and I leaned over to Tom Cochran, who serves part of Lansing, and I said, just think, Tom, we're the old dogs now.
Yeah, it's amazing.
You know, yeah, it
under
is.
this system. The time just
crazy.
went so quickly. Almost time for you to start thinking about what you're going to do after this.
Almost, right?
Have you given some thought to that yet?
You know, we have, and you know, not ready to go down that road yet. You know, having just been elected to this term, I've got a lot of stuff, you know, in the pipe that we want to continue working on. So we'll let the plans roll out as they come.
Well, let's talk about the election. You know, you were reelected. Scott D'Anda was reelected in the 110th. The only open seat, of course, was the 108th. You know, Scott Cirillo, Democrat, Beau Lefebvre, Republican, duking it out. In the end, Beau Lefebvre won that race. Any reaction to that?
Well, you know, both good candidates. Obviously, I sided with Scott, you know, not just from my party, but, you know, he had a wealth of experience, very moderate guy, good guy once you get to know him. I don't know Beau all that well. I've met him a few times, met him in Lansing this past week. So I look forward, you know, a few years ago when the UP guys started really working together, you know, we said, A, we can be more effective, but B, we want to set the bar up high so people coming in behind us will know what the expectations are if you're a UP legislator. So I fully intend to reach out with open arms to Beau and say, welcome to the team. And let's start working together, because there's very few of us up here, and we need to work together if we're going to be effective.
Of course, you and Scott are Democrats. Tom Casperson, a Republican. Ed McBroom was also a Republican, but a pretty solid member of your
We don't
group.
care about that.
Yeah, right.
You know, on UP issues, it doesn't matter. You know, is mining a Republican or Democratic issue? Is forestry? Is tourism up here? Right. You know, those are UP issues.
Okay. Democrats went into this election hoping to make some gains in the Michigan House. Didn't happen. Didn't change
happen.
at all.
No.
What happened?
Well, you know, certainly the Trump phenomenon, you know, that we saw. And I don't know if it's as much a Trump phenomenon as it was a failure, again, for the Democrats to turn out and vote. If you look nationally, you know, Trump only got 300,000 more votes than John McCain did in 2008, yet Hillary got something like 6 million less than Obama did that year. So it really was a failure, I think, on my party to turn out and vote for our candidates. But you're right, in the Michigan House, this was our big year to make some big gains, if not take majority, and we fell flat. Now, we picked up one Republican seat, or a seat that had been held by a Republican, but unfortunately we lost one of our incumbents, someone who happens to be a dear friend of mine, Bill Lavoie from Monroe, and so that one stings a little bit. Bill's a good legislator, and like I said, a dear friend, and you know, that kept me up election night.
Okay, so we're back to 63-47, I think.
Absolutely.
Is the count.
Yep.
And of course, Senate is controlled by Republicans as well.
Super majority there.
Super majority. You know, any thoughts on the first congressional race? I know it doesn't directly affect you, but pretty heated race.
No, but it does. And I've met the general. Certainly I was backing Lon. I just thought his demeanor was better. His policy perspective was better. It was more lopsided. You know, I thought it would be a close race where either had an opportunity. But I will say this, much like I said about Beau, I look forward to reaching out to the general and his UP staff more, because quite frankly, the people of the Upper Peninsula need good constituent services from their local congressman.
You know, the Upper Peninsula was treated, and I use that word sarcastically, to the very worst of negative campaigning. You know, we had 2 hot seats here. There were only 2, I think, congressional seats in Michigan that were really
contested,
open,
right?
contested.
Yep.
And of course, the 108th was a highly contested race. You know, and the advertising that came in, not so much from the candidates, but from the state party, the national party, and
Other
some outside
special
PACs,
interests, right?
You know,
Yep.
it's just kind of unbelievable.
It's terrible, and I will tell you that, you know, one thing I pride myself on is any campaign I've ever run, I have kept that nastiness out. I've always run on my record. I always ran on what I've done and what I hope to do, and I'll continue that until the day I am done serving.
And to me, you know, someone who's observed it for a long time, it was almost well, it was humorous,
Right.
because the Democratic state group, you know, talked about Beau Lefebvre and his friends in Lansing, and the Republicans.
And Scott Salello's, all his evil friends in Lansing.
Right.
Neither of them have friends in Lansing yet. They've never been there.
Right.
I'm sure they'll make friends, but yeah, it is a joke.
But so it's all set for now, and as you said, you're going to be reaching out to Beau Lefebvre
Yeah,
to work together.
and again, I met Beau before the election. I saw him in Lansing when he was down for orientation. But absolutely, we'll reach out, and he's part of the team now, and we operate that way, and we'll continue to do so.
Okay. Lame duck session started. We'll talk about that and what's coming up after we take one more break. We'll be back with more on the Ryan Report in just a couple of minutes. Our guest this morning is State Representative John Keevala, just re-elected to a third term in the Michigan Legislature. You've already been back doing some legislating in this so-called lame duck session.
Yep.
What's happening?
Well, you know, this past week was really about leadership elections. We did have some bills, but nothing earth-shattering, just kind of routine stuff. Okay. You know, I don't expect a lot in lame duck. We've got some stuff to button up. Certainly energy policy is going to be a big one to try to get through. There's some other things. We're going to make a run at dark stores to get that through. I've got a handful of things personally I'm going to try to run through. But I don't expect the fireworks that we thought we could have. I think the Republicans were itching that way or inching that way, but they assumed they were going to lose quite a few seats. And if not lose majority, they were going to get close, because there's always people in the Republican Party that may not believe in that bill or that policy. And so, you know, we expected it to be a lot closer, and we'd have fireworks. We kind of maintain the status quo, and so I don't think there's the huge push to try to move some of these controversial issues.
And of course, the leadership has changed. First of all, there's a new speaker in the House.
There is. Tom Leonard will be the new speaker coming in. He was already elected by the Republican caucus. Tom's a good man. He's very conservative, so we disagree a lot on policy, but as a person, he is a good person. I know Tom and his wife Janelle very well. Tom and I came in the legislature at the same time. I have a very good relationship with him. Their new floor leader is Dan Lowers, another guy I came in with. Dan sits across the aisle from me. So I've got a good relationship with the folks in leadership on that side.
And you've got some new leadership on your side as well.
Yeah, we do. Our floor leader is Christine Gregg. I think Christine will do a remarkable job. She's a one-term legislator going into her second. And then our new Democratic leader is Sam Singh, another gentleman I came in. Sam's a former mayor from East Lansing, was our floor leader, very smart, very assertive, and I think Sam will do a great job for us.
I saw a headline where we're going to have the first woman to chair the Appropriations Committee.
Yeah, Laura Cox,
right.
Wife of former Attorney General Mike Cox.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, Laura's just finishing up her first term. She served on Appropes the first year. And nothing against Laura, but the Republicans don't have like a real deep bench on their side on appropriations, and I think she was the consensus best pick of who sat there.
Of course, nobody has deep benches now when people come and go in 6 years.
No, I tell people, you know, really, when I vote for speaker, you know, we really have two choices. Vote for someone who served 2 years in the legislature, or vote for someone who's got 2 years left.
Right. Yeah, it doesn't make much sense. You know, will your assignments change in the coming term?
I don't think so. I played my hand pretty well through the leadership elections that I'm pretty comfortable that I will be the vice chair of the Natural Resources Committee again, have a seat on energy, probably maintain my position as deputy whip, I'm going to guess. So like I said, I played my cards pretty well.
Those decisions still have to be made.
Yeah.
And you know, what's happened in Lansing may give us some clue as to what's going to happen in Washington. You know, there's an assumption that when you control all the bases of power that you pretty much can run rampant, but it hasn't happened in Michigan.
It hasn't.
You know, we've had the governor and both houses in Republican control.
Right. You know, the governor is pretty moderate in a lot of regards, and a lot of people look at right to work and some of these other things and say, oh, you know, he's not moderate. Look at what he did. People don't understand how the game is played. The governor has an agenda he'd like to get through, and if he doesn't play ball on some of these issues, he's not going to get his stuff through. So we've got a fairly moderate governor. We've got a Senate that really has been more deliberate in its actions sometimes than the House has been. The House has always been the most conservative, and actually with this election they're going to get even more conservative. So it'll be an interesting dynamic how it plays out.
You, I think you dealt with something on driverless cars already going
Yeah.
back. What's happening there?
Well, we know, you know, that's kind of the future of the automobile technology. You know, Google has their own car they're building right now. I was actually at Google a couple years ago and got to ride in one of the cars. It was a Lexus SUV they had converted to driverless, and I sat in the passenger seat and let the car drive me around town, and it was pretty neat. So ask yourself, if this technology is coming, why, as the automobile stayed, wouldn't we want it to happen here? And so the legislation we passed now opens up our laws a little bit more to allow that flexibility, to allow more testing and things of that nature. Very controlled, but really we want to be at the heart of this technology as it advances.
Okay. You mentioned the dark store, big box store issue, property taxes. Is it dead in the Senate?
I don't want to say it's dead, but I would say if we played our hand wrong, it was probably forcing a vote in the House before summer break, because when we left, Senator Brandenburg, who chairs the committee in the Senate that needs to take this up, was on our side, was going to take it up and vote it through. He was convinced. We returned back in September after 3 months of letting the chamber beat on him, and he was talking about how great Walmart is in the community, the jobs they provide, the economic base they provide, and he doesn't seem interested. He seems to be stonewalling on a committee. So perhaps we should have waited till fall. I will say that the appellate court decision kind of put a firewall up for now on these cases, so they're not happening right now, but we know that we need to get the statute through. If I were to guess, I would say it's going to be next term.
I was going to ask, is the appellate court's ruling enough to stop the problem, or not?
You know, the administration at first thought, boy, problem's done. Appellate court ruled, it's a published decision which carries the weight of law, so no problem.
And we should say they pretty much ruled against the practice that this issue would have dealt
Exactly,
with.
right. We look at it, our attorneys have said, well, that's well and good for now, but we need a final solution in place. And that would be the legislation. And so what we're trying to do is make a play for David Maturin, who carries the bill, to now chair tax policy. And if we can do that, I think it gives us more leverage to eventually get that bill through.
Okay, got some more questions for you. We'll
Sure.
get to those in a couple of minutes. Back with more on the Ryan Report after we take this break. Talking with State Representative John Keevala. John, the electric power continues to be an issue.
Yeah.
The Senate approved something now. Does this still have to go back to the House for further action?
Well, it does, and it's going to be an uphill battle. They really kind of stifle what people see as choice. And choice is really kind of a complicated issue. Everyone wants choice to go to another provider.
Or the opportunity.
Or the opportunity to. And certainly the law right now allows 10% to do that. So the problem is, if we opened it up to broad choice, is we're going to close 10 or 11 coal-fired power plants in Michigan within the next few years, including potentially Presque Isle within the next 2 or 3. There are none of these alternative energy suppliers that are looking at new generation. And so if we don't have these utilities that have a solid customer base, they can't get the financing to build power plants. You know, you can imagine, investors are not going to invest in a utility billions of dollars to build generation if they can't show that they have customers willing to pay that money back. And so we have to be very careful on how we allow this. So yeah, they passed the Senate, again, uphill battle in the House. I've got UP specific issues, including the transmission to the Lower Peninsula, that I'm holding out there. I'll be a no on these bills unless I can get positive action on our UP issues.
Is that included at all in the Senate?
It hasn't been yet, though there's a Senate bill over there that we certainly could include. There's also a House bill that would do the same. So the potential exists to fix it, I think, to help the UP. And I won't be there until we have that discussion.
And it's still likely the Presque Isle Power Plant has a very limited future?
It is. You know, unfortunately it is. And we've been dealing with this for years, but for a variety of reasons, including the fact that the owner of that facility does not want to operate it anymore. You know, people always come to me and say, what can you do to save it? And I said, first of all, it's hard to answer that question when the owner of the property wants to close it badly. Hard to convince them to keep it open. With that said, the plan is moving forward for the 2 facilities that would replace that generation. Little hiccup with the Public Service Commission a week ago, but not a big hiccup. Basically, go back and answer a handful of questions before we approve this. So we expect probably an approval from the Public Service Commission mid to late December.
The general economy of the region doing fairly well. Empire Mine, of course, is closed. Possible closing of the Presque Isle Power Plant, that's like 150 jobs.
Yeah, absolutely.
We have kind of a construction boom going in Marquette that's pretty positive.
Well, and that's something we have to try to work very hard to connect those dots, and there are a lot of people working. People in the skilled trades are working at that, certainly some people at Cliffs, the governor's office. We have, you know, Operation or Project Empire, the governor designated kind of a economic recovery designation to Negaunee and Ishpeming to help with some of these things. There are a lot of people looking, but you're right, we have to try to connect some of these dots, because certainly people at Presque Isle Power Plant or Cliffs, if we can move them into some of these skilled trades jobs that are much in demand right now, we're looking for people and we can't find them. Those are good paying jobs with good benefits. That will help, but you know, we have to cushion it. Those are big blows.
We have less than 2 minutes, probably not enough time to do justice to this subject, but the Republican majority has pushed very hard to reduce budget expenditures in the area of corrections.
Yeah.
And there are those who feel that there was a Detroit Free Press story that said the prison system is not assigning risk to the prisoners in the same way they have in the past. You know, we have less high risk and more low risk. There's the issue of presumptive parole. You know, what are your general thoughts in this area? You know, the question comes down to, are we jeopardizing safety in the name of budget cutting?
We have. I will tell you, certainly we have. You don't have to look any farther than the privatized prison service, food service, excuse me. We're saving a handful of millions, allegedly, out of a $2 billion budget, but we're putting our prisons at risk. Look at what happened at Kinross. And most people don't know the full extent of what happened at Kinross, but it was very close to losing a prison. So you're right, and I'm not going to knock on the Department of Corrections as much as I'm going to knock on my colleagues in the legislature, because we're forcing their hand. When we tell prisons, you know, or Department of Corrections, you have to close a prison, what are they to do? Right. So there are prisoners that are being reassigned or redesignated by their classification. That is happening. I think if we're going to be successful with corrections, we have to go back to a degree and do some more job training and education in prisons. If you keep them from coming back to prison, you win. You lower the numbers.
Right, that's a good thing. Thanks very much for coming in. And,
you bet, anytime.
And best of luck as you begin to start your new term.
All right.
I'm sure we'll have you back again
I'm sure you
in
will.
the near future. Back with some other thoughts for you after this break. I remember as a kid playing with friends and saying something like, "Say the secret password and you can enter." As I grew up, I didn't find myself thinking about passwords very often. At least that was true until the dawn of the internet age. In the early days, it was fairly simple. I came up with a basic password and that was all I needed. But little did I know what was lurking down the road. I added an internet site for the bank I was dealing with and they wanted a password. So I gave them the trusty one I had been using and they said, "Hold on, this password doesn't meet our requirements. It doesn't have the right number of letters or numbers or whatever it might have been." So I came up with a new one. No big deal. I could remember 2 passwords, but I was so naive. As time went on, I added some new apps on my phone, some requiring that I sign on with a password. Again, they weren't always satisfied with the ones I was already using. Confusion started growing. One day I tried to buy some music on iTunes. I'd done it before. They asked for my password and I typed it in. They said it was wrong. I tried a couple more and they were also wrong. So they decided to lock me out. The only way I could get back in was, you guessed it, a new password. And once again, none of the existing ones I had worked, so I had to come up with yet another new password. And as if the password overload wasn't enough, while all this was going on, I also needed a PIN number for some of my accounts. Again, one wasn't usable in every case, so at last count I had 3. And then there's the username. Oftentimes that's simple, just needing your email address. But other times it's more complicated than that. They require something different. Just to add to this adventure, I also need usernames and passwords at work. They're different than all the other ones I have. So as my devices and apps and accounts multiplied, so did my usernames and PIN numbers and those dreaded passwords. I made a list, but I don't carry it around with me, so at times I become desperate. Faced with a request for a password, I again encounter that dilemma. Do I guess? And if I guess wrong, will they lock me out? And if they do, will I be forced to come up with a new password again? It all came to a head the other day. I went to a store where I could use my phone to help make the purchase, but when I opened the app, it asked for my password. It hadn't done that before. I scratched my head, typed one in, and it rejected it. I threw up my hands and went screaming from the store. No, that didn't really happen, but that was the way I felt. Everything actually worked out okay in the end. But I don't know where I go from here. I just know there are more passwords in my future and so many in my past. Passwords and usernames and PIN numbers. It's a never-ending nightmare. I'll be back in 2 minutes. It's time to wrap it up for another Sunday. We're almost a week into the firearm deer season, so I hope those of you who are out chasing the elusive whitetail are having some success. If not, you have a little over a week to go. Keep the TV6 website in mind for all the latest news. Go to uppermichigansource.com, where you can also find a rebroadcast of this show each week. Thanks to Representative John Keevala for joining us this morning for a post-election update on developments in Lansing. All the time we have for this week. I look forward to seeing you again next Sunday morning.